Good morning. My name is Sherri Sinniger. I'm the branch manager here at the Onalaska Library, part of the Crosse County Library system. I'm here for another installment of I Was Just Reading. Today, I've been thinking about the books of Laura Ingalls Wilder. The books of Laura Ingalls Wilder have long been a favorite of mine ever since I was a young girl. As you can see here are my weathered copies, personal copies, and goodness sake, they look old, just like me. But I've been doing some additional reading on Laura. I've enjoyed it very much, and I'd like to share some of that with you. The first book I read, which is uncharacteristic for me, is called Death on the Prairie by Kathleen Ernst. It's a Chloe Ellefson mystery. Chloe is a curator at a museum, Old World, Wisconsin. It is a typical mystery with murder, intrigue, a little bit of romance, but I feel that this is very, very well written and very, very well researched. It talks about Chloe and her sister who are on a trip. Chloe feels she has a quilt that could have belonged to Laura Ingalls Wilder. And so they go on a bus trip to find out at the different Laura Ingalls Wilder sites if this was indeed a quilt that belonged to Laura. Like I said, it involves a little romance, a little murder, but very, very well written. One part of the book made me stop and think whether I am a book person, a TV series person, or a truther person when I think of Laura Ingalls Wilder. Some people prefer and are dedicated to the books. I think that's me. I grew up with them. I loved each and every one of them. Other people prefer the reality shown in the Little House on the Prairie TV series. I was never a big watcher of that, so again, I count myself as a book person or a truther, which I think I'm moving towards as I read some more of the books that explore the relationship between Laura Ingalls Wilder, her daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, and their lives together and as separate, strong women. So think of who you might be, a book person, a TV series person, or a truth person. So I learned many little tidbits of things that I'd like to mention. Who was Freddie? Often you don't think of Freddie. Freddie was a baby brother of Laura who they lost while they were in Burr Oak, Iowa, I believe. Nellie Oleson, the dreaded Nellie Oleson, is really a combination of three girls that Laura met in their travels. So she's more of a conglomeration. I was a young mother working at a library when I came across this book, Ghost in the Little House, A Life of Rose Wilder Lane. I was incensed at the very thought of this. This book purported that Rose Wilder Lane was indeed the author of the Little House series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. That was not an idea I wanted to accept at all. I'm having a hard time even holding this book, but as I've been reading in my other examples, it was most probably the truth. Laura had the stories, and Rose Wilder Lane wrote them out for her. Another book that I use for my research is an older book. It's The Life of Laura Ingalls Wilder by Donald Zokert. So that's another one that you could be interested in. This was a fun book by Wendy McClure. It's called The Wilder Life: My Adventures in the Lost World of Little House on the Prairie. Wendy was a middle-aged woman who became enthralled with Laura Ingalls Wilder. And like I did, she tried to make vanity cakes. She tried to make other recipes. She was completely taken up with the idea of the stories, and also considered the idea that Rose Wilder Lane had a hand in writing these books. She calls it her travels, her Laura experience, and she bought herself a churn, a Crock and Dash churn to make butter. It turned to whipped cream and then to a curd-like butter, and much to her dismay, it just tasted like butter. The book also talks about Laura's contentious relationship with Mary, her sister who went blind. Mary was always thought of the goody one. One time she told Laura that blonde hair is better, and Mary had quite a sharp tongue. In contrasting the two characters, Laura's badness makes Mary look even better. And Mary once copped to the truth. I wasn't wanting to be good. I was showing off to myself, being vain and proud, and deserved to be slapped for it. They visited all of the Laura Ingalls Wilder sites, including De Smet, Missouri and the Ozarks. Again, this also talks about the ghost in the Little House book. It's called the Detailed Academic Autobiography, where Rose was the real writer and the creative spirit for the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. Another book I read that has a lot more of a political bend is called Libertarians on the Prairie. Laura Ingalls Wilder, Rose Wilder Lane, and the Making of the Little House books. Again, I say this is more a political look at it. This book leans a little more tends to be kinder to Rose Wilder Lane. It says that Rose Wilder Lane felt obligated to work and sell the stories. Rose had some very eccentric ways, traveled in Albania, lived overseas. She promoted freedom is what being America is, and spontaneous order and limited government and free markets. This book reports that Laura delivered the manuscripts to Rose for Rose to edit. Rose's mental state is often in question. She often fell to physical and mental collapse and was a bit moody and mood swings. This one recalls a time when Laura and Rose were collaborating on a car trip and sharing stories. So that was recalled as one of the happy moments that Rose and Laura had. Rose adopted several adoptive children to help them out. They would often come to Missouri to stay with them. One of these adopted children was Roger Lee McBride, who ended up being the heir to the Laura Ingalls Wilder estate. It's an interesting read. Again, I would say this book favors Rose Wilder Lane as the author and is very much more kind to Rose than the next book I'm due to talk about. And this is The Prairie Fires, The American Dreams of Laura Ingalls Wilder by Carolyn Fraser. Maybe more than you ever really wanted to know about Laura Ingalls Wilder, but it's very interesting to consider some of the ideas in this book. In this book, again, it brings up the competition with Mary, and that Laura Ingalls Wilder is the naughty one. It mentions the evenness of tone in Laura Ingalls Wilder writing, except when she experienced unfairness or unkind behavior. There was a story in here about Roxy, a dolly that her mother Carolyn had made for her. And when she was a bit older, it was suggested that she give Roxy to a neighbor girl. And she was talked into doing it. And later she found Roxy discarded in the garbage. And she felt very, very poorly about that. Another little fact I learned is that while Laura was in Burr Oak, Mrs. Starr, the wife of a family doctor, asked to adopt Laura. This was very upsetting for Laura, and Carolyn and Ma and Pa Ingalls politely declined, saying they simply couldn't do without Laura. But this was a time just beyond slavery when she certainly would have been put into some sort of servitude. Another interesting parallel in this book, it compares Laura Ingalls Wilder with the writings of Hamlin Garland, author who hailed from our very own West Salem, Wisconsin. After their travels through the big woods and De Smet and the long winter, Little House on the Prairie on the way home, Laura was married to Almanzo, and they went to the Ozarks, the land of big red apples. Laura made a return trip to see Pa as he declined in health. Pa played the fiddle for Laura and the other children and spoke a final farewell to Laura and told her, "I want you to have the fiddle." Charles Ingalls died in 1902, June 8th, 1908. This book also further explores the writings of Rose Wilder Lane, who did Herbert Hoover biography, some controversial periodicals about Jack London, and other things. She tended to write on a shoestring as she needed money. So Lane's mother, here it is, Rose Wilder Lane, it is felt that she resented writing for her mother. And I'm just going to read a part of this. The attitude toward her mother hardened. You must understand that what sold was your article edited. You must study how it was edited and why. Above all, you must listen to me. For years upon years, I have been telling you to stop saving money and start making money. Well, now I went out and made you some money. First, to show you how it could be done, but God damn it all, you've got to go on and make some more now. So, Rose had bought her father and mother the Rock House in Missouri, another controversial purchase. Laura and Menzo didn't care for the Rock House. So it's just interesting to examine the relationship and the back and forths going on between Laura and her parents. Another controversy arose in, let me just see here. It arose when the American Library Association decided to change the name of the Laura Ingalls Wilder Medal due to racism and inclusiveness. I'll just read this little bit from ALA. Laura Ingalls' books have been and will continue to be deeply meaningful to many readers. Although Wilder's work holds a significant place in the history of children's literature and continues to be read today, ALSC has had to grapple with the inconsistency between Wilder's legacy and its core values of inclusiveness, integrity, and respect, and responsiveness through an award that bears Wilder's name. I'm not going to get on a political side about this, but as a young child, these books meant the world to me. It gave me, especially Little House in the Big Woods, happening so close to us in Pepin, Wisconsin, and I devoured these books as I grew older. I think this paragraph perhaps puts it into perspective. Perhaps most alluring about Wilder's novels is that they provide what amounts to a blueprint of attaining the life they describe. The Little House books, particularly the two bearing that title, read almost biblically detailed how-to guides for creating a prairie fortress against the forces of the world, whether natural, native, or governmental. Among the tasks outlined are point-by-point instructions on smoking meat, churning butter, fashioning bullets, making cheese, preparing a snow water bath in a cabin in the winter, harvesting maple syrup, weaving a straw hat, operating a wheat thresher, fording a river, washing laundry, constructing a fireplace, digging a well, making a rocking chair, and building a log cabin. There are some episodes of racism, inclusivity in the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, but I prefer to take them as a chronology and almost like they said, a manuscript or guidebook of how people lived on the prairie. I have made maple sugar candy and snow. I've made replica quilts. I've enjoyed the stories. I would long to hear the songs of Pa's fiddle and feel the warmth of a log cabin. It was a big part of my growing up, and these books are treasured for me. I've enjoyed reading even more about them. I would highly recommend Death on the Prairie as a fun, informational, historically correct fiction mystery book by Kathleen Ernst, a Chloe Ellison mystery. I would recommend The Wilder Life. Someday I'd like to take a trek across South Dakota and Minnesota and the Ozarks and see these places myself. Prairie Fires, a comprehensive look at Laura Ingalls Wilder's life and what was going on with the rest of the country and her relationships with her family, her sisters and her daughter, and Libertarians on the Prairie, a more political view of the writings of Laura Ingalls Wilder and Rose Wilder Lang. Again, the two other books I used, this is an older book, The Life of Laura Ingalls Wilder by Donald Zokert. And the one that got it all started, The Ghost in the Little House by William Holtz, A Life of Rose Wilder Lang. In closing, as Little House in the Big Wood ends with a fictional Laura snug and cozy in her family's Wisconsin cabin, the young narrator offers a poem that sums up her creator's worldview. This is now, she thinks. Now is now. It can never be a long time ago. I look forward to creating another. I've been reading, and I enjoyed sharing these Laura Ingalls Wilder books with you. These books, well, these are my personal copies, but the other things are available at your Crosse County Library. And I wish you a snug and cozy November and December.